Welcome back to The Outright Effect, a podcast in which unique perspectives challenge us to be better versions of ourselves. I'm Tempsy.
And I'm Shelly.
And today we're talking about starting a family. So we really wanted to get into what are the things that you need to consider when starting a family? What do you need to prepare for financially, maybe emotionally? And we're not just talking about family in the sense of two parents and a child or several children. I mean, there's a lot of considerations that go into having even things like pets, dogs, things like that. So we want to talk about that today.
Yeah, and I think also something that makes us think about these things right now is we are of that age or generation where you have a lot of friends who are getting married, having kids, or have young kids, or planning for those kinds of things. So we thought it would be an interesting and kind of time-appropriate topic.
Exactly. So as you guys know, Shelly is married and she has a dog. Mm-hmm. So what did you consider from a financial standpoint before you decided to get a dog?
So I've had dogs my whole life. I pretty much grew up with dogs and all that kind of stuff. But let me tell you, this dog that I have right now, named Katsu, he's the most expensive dog I've ever had in my life.
That's right.
So I would honestly say I was not prepared financially for this dog because I thought it was going to be a breeze. Previously, with other dogs I've had, they've all just kind of been for lack of a better word, mutts, mixed dogs. They were lab mix and that kind of stuff. And they never had any health issues. They were totally fine. They stayed outside. They got rained on and nothing ever happened to them. They were good. We would give them a bath as usual, take them to the vet for only annual checkups. Nothing really crazy was going on with them. But this dog I have right now goes to the vet about once a month. Because he has allergies. He's allergic to everything. He's a purebred. This is the first purebred I've ever had in my life. I'm almost never again. Only because vet bills are expensive.
Oh, yeah.
I got him insurance because the last dog I had, before he passed away, he was really old. He had back problems. And supposedly at that point, the only thing that would have helped him was possibly surgery. I mean, we're not sure if it would have helped him or not. But surgery, that was going to be $10,000 at least. And I was like, oh my goodness. If I ever get a dog again and he needs something like this, I better have insurance. So I got insurance for my dog when he was a puppy, 2 months old, right after I got him. And thank goodness I did because I use that a lot. More than I'd like to admit. So, he has these allergy injections he has to take once a month. And he also eats a lot of things that are not food. So
I had a similar experience with a purebred dog. And I would agree with you that it's important to get pet insurance. And I do feel like a lot of people go into deciding that they want a pet, they get the pet, and they don't opt into something like that. And then they have to sometimes make a really hard
tough
choice.
Decisions, yeah.
Yeah. So can you explain a little bit as to how your pet insurance works?
I remember there being 3 different packages I could get. One was just wellness, annual checkups. The other one was kind of critical care. And there was something else. I don't remember what that last one was. I think it was some kind of add-on or something like that. So I went into it thinking that I'll just get this emergency care one because my last dog only might have needed it at the very end of his life when it was an emergency. But apparently my dog has emergencies all the time because he's eaten ibuprofen and rat poison and all these crazy things where we have to rush into the ER. Yeah, he's it's weird because you can leave food out on the table and he won't touch that, but he will eat all these other things.
So funny.
He most recently ate a toothbrush. That was, I don't even know why. It was a brand new toothbrush. But so I would say dogs are pretty expensive, especially this one that I have right now. He's from another island. We got him from the Big Island in Kona. So we did fly him in as a puppy. I took him on the plane like a carry-on bag and put him under the seat. It was very cute. He was embarrassing me like crazy at the airport, though, because it was hot. He was away from his mom for the first time, so he was yelping like crazy. And someone probably thought I was doing something terrible to him, but I was not. I was just carrying him. Once he got on the plane, though, and it was AC, he was good. He slept the whole ride, didn't make a noise. But, yeah, I think that sometimes I do feel guilty because all these times I have to rush my dog to the ER and he's eating something he's not supposed to. It probably reflects on the owner. That's not someone who should have a dog. But I would say that he's an exception because I've never had this problem with the 3 or 4 other dogs I've ever had in my life. It's just him. But,
He finds
he's
a way.
spoiled brat. Yes, he likes filtered, refrigerated water from a Brita, prefers it to tap. He'll kind of look at the tap, check it out, and walk away until you change it
funny.
out for him. So, I will admit, I guess he was trained that way because how else would he know,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
But anyways, that's my experience with having a dog. I know Tempsy's had a dog before.
Yes.
A couple of dogs, right? But currently she does not have a dog. She has a baby.
Yes, I have a baby. He is 2 years old, and before we, went into talking about having a child, we did think about the financial aspect, but we were thinking about the financial health, of us way before we decided to have a kid. So, I would say though, and I know this is easier said than done, I was really thankful that my credit cards were paid off because I didn't live life, prior to meeting my husband, I didn't live life the way I do now where I pay off my credit cards every month so that I don't incur interest. I would just spend money and leave it on the card and not think about the interest. And so, having them paid off has really helped us be able to support a child in a different way without having to worry about our balances, without having to worry if we only have to pay the minimum or whatever the case might be. So I know it's definitely easier said than done, but I would encourage folks, pay off your credit card bills. It helps your credit. Pay your credit card bills every month in full before they're due, and you will be so surprised as
You'll
to
thank
how
yourself later.
Yes, it relieves so much stress. And so, the reason I say this is you just have to buy so much stuff for kids. So much stuff. And, you get a lot of it as gifts. I'll be honest, my kids' clothes, I got so many clothes for gifts that I think maybe I paid under $100 for clothes in general for my kids so far, because people will just give them and I'll be like, all right, I'll take it.
Yeah. And I'll be honest, as a person who buys gifts for my friends' kids, like usually I give them clothes. I don't know. I'm just also a practical gift giver, as we covered in a previous episode. But I figure because kids grow out of clothes so fast, you just got to replace it like in the blink of an eye, right?
Mm-hmm. But I also think, and I agree with that, I get a lot of kids' clothes too, almost every year for Christmas. That's typically, year is the first year that I started to give toys. But I think it just helps out the parents, especially those in Hawaii who don't have a lot of room. It's likely they don't have a lot of room. And so getting them clothes just makes things so much easier. Then they don't have to go buy when their kid grows every 2.5 months.
Yep.
Just get them the bigger size. I think another thing that I would advise folks of, from a financial aspect, I think there are a lot of women out there who, they've had to wait a long time to have children for one reason or another, and they've just been waiting. They've been pining to have a child, this baby of their own. And so once that happens, once it finally comes to be, you just want to give everything to this child. You want to give them the best of the best of the best. And I would caution folks to be cognizant of what you're buying and why, how much you're spending on it, instead of buying things from emotion. Mm-hmm. Because, for instance, strollers, let's say. I know people who buy $800 strollers that work just as well as the $100 to $200 ones. Actually, some are even cheaper than that. Mm-hmm. Wherever you find strollers. I know the Babies R Us in Hawaii is gone, but wherever you buy strollers, you can find a good stroller for less than $200, and it lasts a really long time. And you only need one, maybe two. The first one, you can take the carrier, the car seat carrier, in and out of your cart and just drop it right in the base of the stroller, which makes it super easy. But once the kid grows out of that, it has an attachment to where you can buckle your kid right into that attachment if you're not taking the car seat in and out anymore.
It's kind of like a clip-in kind of situation, right?
Exactly. So, that stroller, for the most part, is usually pretty big. And so we got a smaller one. But that smaller one, my sister-in-law wasn't using, so she let us use it, and she wasn't using her tiny baby one anymore when my son was born, so we used that one. So we never really paid for a stroller, and I know not everybody has that opportunity, but we could have said, no, we want to buy our own. We want to buy the best of the best. If people are going to hand out things to you and you don't have to worry, like you have to be very cautious of the cloth, any cloth that's in a stroller, because if you can't take it out of the stroller and wash it, then you don't want to use it for a newborn child. Like, let me put that out there. You want to make sure things are either new or super clean.
Because they have more likeliness of like getting sick easier and that kind of stuff. So you just want them to be in a clean environment.
But most contraptions for children these days, you can take the cloth part out
and wash it.
So if you are getting something handed down to you from somebody else who's trying to clear their baby stuff out, just make sure you wash it. That's all I would say.
Yeah. And I think something that you mentioned, and obviously I'm not like a parent of a child, but I think when you're mentioning that, you know, there's some people out there who maybe have wanted a kid for a really long time and had to wait for whatever reason. Like I can understand someone getting really excited once that baby comes, but you also have years to spoil them.
Yeah.
Right? You don't have to do it all in the first month of their life. You can stretch it out for at least 18 or longer.
Exactly. And hey, if you do decide something out of, you know, you just have that feeling that you want to provide that to your child, I'm not judging you. Do it.
Yeah.
But I think that when you're going into something from a financial standpoint, you're going to grow your family, even getting a dog, like there can be some emotional decisions that happen that aren't absolutely necessary. So if you can try to hone in on that and avoid spending unnecessary funds so that you can invest in your future or, you know, invest in your child in college. Yeah, exactly. Try if you can. That's all. So what about emotionally, Shelly? What might you have to think of from an emotional standpoint when it comes to getting a pet?
So some of the things that I think, so I'm just gonna, this isn't in no particular order, obviously, but I think one thing is that, you know, getting a pet, in the first couple, so I got him when he was about 2 months old. And in the first 2 or 3 months, I almost thought like this must be what having a newborn child is like, because I was housebreaking my dog. I was waking up, you know, a couple of hours in the night to take him out and that kind of thing. He would like, thankfully for us, he never really had any accidents. We didn't have like a pad we could put on the floor, and he's a Labrador, so he's huge. I mean, it's not like I wanted him to learn how to go to the bathroom in the house either. I wanted him to go outside. So lucky for us, he would bark when he needed to do that. So obviously that meant it was a built-in alarm. He was alive, you know, he would bark, we would get up, take him out. He also did, you know, require a lot of training at the get-go, because you want to make sure you get in those like good pet habits from the beginning, like no biting or chewing on stuff, no jumping, that kind of thing. But you also want to teach him his name and how to stay and all that stuff. And one thing for anyone who's thinking about getting a pet, or, you know, maybe thinks what I'm saying is funny, I mean, humans can learn other languages from each other and learn how to speak it back, but I will never speak dog, and my dog will never speak English, you know, like we will never fully understand each other. I mean, he has a personality of his own for sure. He knows the words like walk and dinner, and that's about it. And I will never know what he's thinking, but, you know, I could kind of tell non-verbally, right? Like, you know, if he's acting a little whatever, I know, you know, what things he likes and he doesn't like. For example, if we give him a bath and we're like toweling him off, there are certain places on his body he does not like to get toweled off, so we just let it go, because he kind of not growls like angrily at us, but kind of warns us that he doesn't like it. So we're like, all right. So in that sense, we can communicate, but he will never be like, hey mom, can you feed me? You know. But also, you know, something I think, you know, the sad part about having a pet is that you will always outlive your pet. Odds are, you know, unless you have a turtle that lives to 100 or something like that. But, you know, I think pets have too short of a life.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that some people don't realize once they have a pet. But this is like my 4th dog. So, you know, I mean, it's challenging and difficult. And today, I think nowadays we know more than before. Like, it's almost like pets or animals have like human-like conditions, you know, like they can be like diabetic, they can have cancer and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, it really almost is like having a person, only they're like a forever child, you know, like you have to get their food out for them constantly. You have to give them a bath. So know those things before you, you know, adopt or purchase a pet, whatever kind of pet that might be. There's
I mean, I never thought about emotionally considering the fact that my dog would one day pass away. Mm-hmm. And that was really rough, not just for me, but for my husband. And we had a dog for, he was 9.5 when he passed away, and we had to make the decision to put him down because he wasn't living a life that was comfortable. He was was having seizures. It was just really, really sad. And I was for a long time, I was like, I'm never getting another pet because I can't go through this again. This was really sad. He was a great dog. He listened. He was super smart. He never went in the house. Like, he was an amazing dog. And I just never thought about that before I got one. And not only that, but even now we want to like buy a bigger house so we can get a dog. Not just so we can get a dog, but like we want to buy a bigger house and get a dog. But then what is my son going to go through if he has this dog that's like his best friend? And we have to, make that hard decision again. That's just, it's so hard. But I will say that the amount of time that you spend with your dog is a bigger dog. And most people think if you get a bigger dog, they're an outside dog and they just stay outside and they're only there for your pleasure when you're ready for them to be around.
Right.
And you only let them in the house or you only spend time with them when it's convenient for you. But I feel like you and your husband and even, your extended family treat him as an actual part of the family.
Yep. It's almost like he's a person. So like sometimes my parents would go to the store or maybe my dad's dropping my mom off to an appointment. The dog gets a car ride, like he goes along with them. And then we take him on, like, I guess we call it like field trips. Where we take him on like a hike, or sometimes we just drive him around in the car and just let him like go out the window and that kind of stuff. And he likes it. So yeah, he's like a person, kind of. I think he thinks that he's a person for sure.
Well, I mean, if that's how you treat him, then he's gonna.
Yeah, and I do think like, I did have my first dog as a child. I want to say he passed away when I was like 9th grade or something like that. And I feel like I had read an article at some point that like having pets as a child like helps kids learn how to deal with grief because that like dogs are not going to live until 80, but yeah, it is like it sucks, but it's like a learning like experience thing. Yeah. So there's sad. A benefit to that. Yeah, it is sad. I don't know. I guess I just like dogs so much. It's like I've never not had a dog for maybe like a year or more. I've always like gotten another dog after. Yeah. But yeah. What are some emotional things
that I had to prepare
for as a parent?
I honestly feel, and I know everybody says this, but you'll never be emotionally ready to have a kid. But I did try. I did try to think about how life was going to change. I did close my eyes and really try to think about a day in the life of a mother, even with a really young child. But what I didn't realize is that day in the life that I thought about is every single day. I was just like, I could handle that one day,
Right.
And so when it happened, I was like, whoa.
This is all the time?
Yeah, this is every day. And when you're feeding every 2 hours, and that 2 hours runs from the time you start feeding a child, that can be a lot because now this child is reliant on you for everything. And I don't know that you can ever truly prepare for that emotionally until you go through it. I don't know. I just don't think it's possible. Somebody out there was able to do it, or maybe there's a mentality out there because originally I didn't want to have kids. So when I got used to the idea of, I do want to have a child, I'm okay with it. Not just okay with it, but I was like, I can wrap my head around what that might be like. I thought I could handle it. And it's not that I didn't handle it, but it was really hard for me. I'll be honest. Like it was tough because it just completely rocked my world. Turned it upside down. If you are thinking about having a child and you don't have any yet, don't just think about what a day in the life would be for that one day. Think about that every single day for, in the beginning, you're changing diapers and feeding and doing so many things for this child throughout the day that in between, say, feedings, you have to decide whether you're going to shower, eat, or take a nap. Those are your options. Like you have to pick one, and that's all you have throughout the day. So think about that every day for at least 3 months it gets a little bit, feedings get a little bit separated. The time in between each feeding separates a little bit longer after that. But, when they start crawling, they need you to have your eyes on them.
Right.
You just have these different milestones that introduce different challenges as you kind of go along. Some things get a little easier, some things get a little harder. And so just think about that. And again, you're never going to be totally prepared, but that might help.
Yeah.
Maybe.
So kind of like feeding off of what Tempsy was talking about with having to be, or not having to be, but trying to be and like preparing yourself mentally and emotionally for having a newborn child and what that first few months might look like. I know myself, and I'll be super honest with you guys out there, I will be the person to say this. That is not something I feel like I would necessarily be thrilled about. And I probably already knowing this before children are even part of my life, which note here, they will not be. But that's, I for myself, that's just not something I would feel like I would handle well, which is part of why I'm like, I'm good with dogs. Yeah. So, kind of expanding on that. And, one of the reasons why I want to have this conversation is for the people out there who agree with me or agree with my opinion or preference to not have kids. Like, it's okay. You know what I mean? I don't want people and anybody out there thinking like I have to because someone's expecting me to or anything like that. If you don't want to do something, you don't have to do it. I'm choosing not to do it myself. And this comes off of, I think a lot of us feel that very strong social expectation for married couples to have children and everyone thinking that you need to do that. But if it's not for you, that's fine. That's totally okay. Yep. It's not for me. And I will definitely say that for anyone who thinks that they can't say it for themselves. So feel empowered, people.
Yes.
You don't have to do anything you don't want to.
100%.
Yeah. And I think I'm in a place where, people I don't know as well, or maybe they're not sure how old I am, like we're new acquaintances or whatever, but they know I'm married. Or, they look at me and assume I'm at a certain age, meaning, probably someone who will have kids soon. This seems to come up a lot. People will ask me, do you have any kids? Are you planning on it? I don't know why people need to be so nosy about this. Even strangers, basically strangers, like acquaintances will ask me this. And I'm just like, why do you even care? But so I do understand from the viewpoint of, maybe friends or people who I know a little bit better asking me this question, because I think there are people who want to go through things together. They've been experiencing this amazing thing, for them, and they want you to experience that too. So
absolutely.
Totally understand that. But usually when I answer and say like, that's not the path for, I see for my life. And honestly, I had to really, really think about how I word this, because when I straight up have said before, I don't want kids, people get all crazy about it. Like people get offended. They're super surprised. For some reason, that phrase just bends them out of shape. I did not say I hate children. I did not say like they're terrible or anything like that. I just said I don't want them.
Yes.
And yeah, after this comes up, so now I'll say that's not the path I see my life going down. That's the way that I say it now. But people feel the need, even if I don't know them, to pressure me or drill me with questions on why. And I'm kind of like, why do you care? But maybe it's just a curiosity thing. I don't know. It comes off to me like they want to try to, like they now see it as their mission to try to convince me to follow their path in life to have kids.
So then what would you say to other folks who agree with you, or they just know enough about themselves to say, I know that it's not for me, having children is not going to be a part of my life or my path. Do you have any advice for them as to what they can say, even if people persist?
I think depending on how, I don't know what word to use. For example, I would consider myself someone who's like, if I make up my mind on something, I'm like set with it. Like that is my choice. Sorry, you're not going to change my mind. So, I mean, if you feel very like you want to be firm on it, I'd just be firm in a nice way. Like say like, thought about it before, don't think it's for me, that kind of thing. And just, I mean, if you want people to stop bothering you about it, honestly, like you just need to like really reiterate it, because I feel like if you show any sign of wavering and possibly changing your mind,
right,
people are just going to come down harder with you on the pressure. So that's one thing I will say. I feel like based on personal experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of our podcasts have been around reflection. So I think for those of you out there who are contemplating this or haven't contemplated this and have decided you don't want to have children or do, really think about, have some reflection time. Think about where you see your life going, where you see yourself in 30 to 40 years. Does it look like you have a family in that time? Or doesn't it? Do you think that you could handle taking care of a child every single day for 18 years?
Yeah.
Whatever that looks like at the time. Because you may be in a situation where you're like, well, tradition dictates that I have a family and have kids, but I'm not trying to convince anybody not to have kids, but as I said before, I was never in the mindset of I want to have a family and I want to have kids. And my husband and I almost didn't stay together because of that. But I took some time, I reflected on it and I said, is it really that I don't want to have kids? Or is it that I'm in a place in my life where I want to make sure that I finish my degree. I want to make sure that I get certain things in place before I have children, because I know how hard it was for my mom. Being a single mother and having a child at 19, it was tough on her. And I'm sure, I haven't asked her, but I'm sure that could have come with a little bit of resentment here and there or frustrations. I remember some of the knockout, drag down, like crying and screaming matches that we used to have when I was really little. And so, I really wanted to make sure that I wasn't just saying this and then, might regret it in the future. So I just want to put that out there to folks. Like, think about what it would be like truly day to day, and if that's something that you want to do.
Yeah. And one thing I would say is, like, not everybody who I happen to have this conversation with is like really insistent on like, no, you must have kids or anything like that. There are some people out there who are super understanding and they acknowledge like, hey, it's not for everyone. Or maybe they reflect on situations that I'm guessing they either know of someone or heard of someone who rushed into something they weren't ready for. And maybe, that person ended up being like a distant parent or something, kind of emotionally removed and not really present in their kid's life. And they're kind of like, that probably wasn't the best time for that person to have a kid either, you know? And for me, I'm kind of like, hey, I think that's really mature of somebody else to say like, hey, it's your choice. It's not for everybody. And potentially not super positive scenarios come out of it, for people who just rush in. And, on the flip side too, I think part of it, being adopted maybe plays into it a little bit because that to me is always an option for later. If I ever happen to change my mind later on, like I could be 50 and be like, I'm going to adopt a kid now.
Because you're so
going to
close
tell me
to that
no.
experience.
Yeah, like why would that be like a, I feel like that should still be an option for anybody.
Sure.
If they feel like whatever point in your life right now you don't want to have a kid. I don't feel like I guess I personally don't feel tied like to the idea of having to have a biological child.
Right.
And yeah, if I happen to be 50 and I decide like I want to adopt a kid now, why not? I'll do it then.
And
that's not my plan yet, but
there's a lot of kids out there.
Yeah, there's a lot of
families,
right, exactly.
So.
There's a lot of kids who need, parents. They're in an orphanage just by themselves. That's basically what happened to me. I was a baby at the time when I was adopted, so I didn't maybe have like the super like lonely feeling of living at an orphanage because that was much earlier than I have a memory for. But for me, I'd rather have a bunch of dogs. Honestly, I think 3 dogs is a good number of dogs. And I rode in someone's van, like a minivan, like soccer mom van. And after I got out, I was like, oh my God, it would be so great if I got this for my dog.
You did.
I'm like, it's easy to get in. He doesn't have to try to jump on the seat in the back. It's just like one little step up. And I could just open the door and like have all these dogs jump in my car. Anyways, my van, if I had a van and if I had more than one dog. But
you know what's so funny about that is my husband wants a van so bad and I refuse. Like I don't know why. I just don't want to be the quintessential soccer mom. I don't have anything against those moms. I played soccer myself, so my mom was a soccer mom. I don't know why, but I just was like, I think maybe I'm in denial or something. I really don't know, but I'm like, and it's much better, especially in Hawaii, because when you open your door and you have this big child carrier or you have 3 dogs coming out of your car, the parking stalls are so small
narrow,
here. Yeah. So your door would hit the other door, and it's probably more practical, but I'm just like refusing to have a van.
I'm like, I want a van so I can get more dogs.
That's why I was laughing. I was like, what?
And, one thing I'll say, I think people out there by this time, they're probably wondering, like, at what point, like, let's say if you're dating or something like that, at what point do you have that conversation about, like, having kids or not?
Early.
Early, yeah.
But not too early. Like,
I don't know. For me, I'm like straight out the gate. I'm like, just letting you know.
I mean, it depends because...
I think for me though, I think because I already knew no, and I feel like so many other people out there are like getting married is like a gateway to having kids. I think that's kind of like a,
like a
mentality
gateway
for
drug.
some people, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they think that's like the steps you need to take,
Yes.
right? So I think if you're like in a relationship and you think it's like maybe serious or whatever, like talk about it, because if your answer is no, I feel like that other person needs to know sooner rather than already being invested.
But don't say, hey, do you want to have kids on your first date?
I was well, I mean, I knew him for a long time before that, but I was like, do you want to have kids? Just letting you know, I don't.
But like to a lot of women who are, younger women who are dating,
Yeah.
that's not a great question to bring
No,
up in the
it's not.
beginning. But one way you could say it is like, hey, I've known you, like in your case, you knew him for a long time. Then you decided to start dating. I think that's appropriate. But when you're just meeting somebody and you're like, if this could turn into my forever love, like I want to make sure they know. Don't start with, hey, do you want to have kids? Like I wouldn't advise that. But if you want to say like, hey, if this ever gets serious, I just want you to know that I'm not in the business of having kids.
Right. Yeah, I think that's something people need to know.
Yeah, I
Sooner
agree.
rather than later. Like, don't be engaged already and then find out. That's probably not the right time.
Man. No, definitely not. So we wanted to talk about a little bit about some of the things that we reflected on after, starting or growing a family. For me, I wanted to bring up the fact that I always thought I was too young to have kids, even when I found out I was pregnant at 32. Like I just was like, I'm too young for this.
Yeah.
Like I'm not supposed to be having a kid yet. My mom had me when she was 19, like I said before, and I have immense appreciation for what she's done for me, especially now that I'm a mother. And I saw a few classmates in high school having kids, and I thought in my head, I'm just not going to be that person. I'm going to wait. I'm going to be mature enough and old enough. But I think there are benefits and challenges to both sides. I honestly don't think there's any right age as to when you have a kid. And I think one of the reasons is because when you have kids when you're younger, so say I had a kid 10 years ago, my kid would already be 10 years old and they'd
Right.
be walking around on their own. I mean, my son walks, but like they'd be dressing themselves.
Right. You could get him a cup of water on his own. Right.
Exactly. And you can have conversations with them and they understand what you're saying completely. So I think that's a big difference to where, me having a 2-year-old and I'm, in my early to mid 30s, I'll say, that, I'm kind of starting from the beginning. And yes, I'm wiser, I would say, than I was when I was younger. Of course, I have more experience now. So I have that in my tool belt, I guess, or whatever you want to call it. But I'm also not as flexible. By the time I had a kid, I was kind of stuck in my ways. Like this is how life is. And
I wake up at this time, I do this next.
Yep.
And this is my routine, right?
Exactly. And that just went out the window. So, I do think that there are some benefits to having a child when you're a little bit younger. And I think there are some benefits to having them when you're older. But I think when you're older, you are stuck in your ways. Your life is what it is at that time for the most part. And it does make it a little bit more challenging. And then when you get older and your kids get older, you tend to separate from your understanding of each other because they're starting to get into new things. Like
There's a gap.
Yeah.
I don't even know what toys are cool. Like are your kids talking about like, oh, I like whatever this show, and I'm like, what are they talking about?
Yes, exactly. I remember my little brother and I are 13 years apart, and he started talking about Pokemon and Dragon Ball Z. And I was like, what are those? What is that? And he was getting these cards and everything. And I was like, kids these days. And I was like,
And you're a kid yourself.
I was like 16 or 20, like, what are they into these days? It's just funny. Another thing I was reflecting about is I wish I had a different mindset going into maternity leave. So for those of you who are looking to have kids soon or you're pregnant right now, I want to caution you that having 3 months off, if that's what, the privilege that you have, or any amount of time off, I was thinking, oh, I'm going to get this cleared out. I'm going to tidy up my house. I'm going to do this. I have 3 months.
That's a lot of time. Yeah.
I've never been off for 3 months in a row as long as I can remember. So I'm going to take this time to get things done that I've just never gotten to. And I was also thinking a little bit about work. So what I will say is if I have the pleasure of being able to go through this process again, I will adjust my mindset. I wish my mindset was my only responsibility right now is to take care of myself and my body for this child and take care of this child. That's it. That's your only responsibility. And caring for yourself means maybe getting out of the house a little bit because you are stuck and locked in this house just feeding this baby every 2 hours. And you do have to decide whether you're going to shower, eat, or take a nap. I get it. So sometimes you do need to go outside, and that's caring for yourself so that you can better care for a child. But maternity leave is not an opportunity to declutter or work on projects. If you do go into it thinking about that, then you might get to a point where you're disappointed. Mm-hmm. And that was rough for me. Mm-hmm. So I want to caution folks out there. And if you're a husband listening, just care for your wife, support her, and let her know you don't have to get all these things done. If there are things that you want to get done during this time, let me help you. I will support you. But just understand that as your husband, I have no expectations of you doing anything but caring for yourself and your child. I think that's good advice for husbands. And my husband did that for me. Like, he was like, no, all you're supposed to be doing is just taking care of yourself and taking care of our son. And I just couldn't get it in my head that that's all I should be doing. Because you always feel like you need to be doing more, especially in this day and age.
Yep.
So another thing that I would like in reflecting on the whole starting or growing a family is my husband and I thought we were on the same page. Like, we talked about when we have kids, this and that'll happen. When we have kids, we're going to do things this way. But in all honesty, for instance, you see a kid out in, on the town or whatever. Yeah. And you're like, oh, my kid will never do that. Trust me. You're going to have to let some things go just for your sanity. And so I urge people not to judge parents out there who, would maybe like letting their kid be a little loud or whatever the case might be. They try their best, but sometimes you just got to let your kid be your kid. And we try our best, but sometimes we're just exhausted. Mm-hmm. So it was just funny to see, like, oh, we used to say, oh, my kid will never do that, or I'll never do that as a parent. And then you're just like, well, that's out the window. So don't judge people out there who have kids. It's tough. It's hard. Let them be. And if you want to say to yourself, if I have kids, I'm not going to let them do that, that's fine. But just know, give yourself a break if you get to that point and it's, you have to change your approach.
So leading off of the, growing your family or extending your family, there was a conversation that I had with somebody, and I don't remember exactly how it went, but I remember them saying something to the effect of like, oh, but you don't have a family. And then they kind of stopped themselves and then backed up a little bit and was like, oh, I mean, sorry, you do. Like, you have a husband, like you have parents, you have, grandparents and that kind of stuff. So that was the first time for me. I was like, that's interesting. Like, I guess, and I feel like from time to time I do, after that point, I had thought back and I noticed that, from time to time, people did kind of mention to me, like maybe in conversation, whatever we were talking about, and saying like, oh, but you don't have a family. But really what they're saying is like, oh, but you don't have children, kind of thing. Right. And, not to say that just because you don't have children, you don't have a family, because obviously there's still other people that are in your life that you're related to, that you would consider close to you and that kind of thing. So, I mean, it didn't dawn on me that kind of phrase could possibly offend somebody, but I guess like this person, stopped themselves, realized that they could be like offending me. I wasn't offended, but I was just kind of like, oh, that's interesting. And so I just kind of wanted to throw that, thought out there, just in case, I mean, it might impact somebody that any of you guys out there know.
Yeah.
But, just something to be considerate of and that kind of thing. And Tempsy and I were actually talking about addressing envelopes and how do you address them. And something that she noticed that she was doing as she was writing names on Christmas cards and things like that, whether somebody was just a couple versus a couple with children. And I think that's kind of interesting because I feel like I do the same thing, but I never even thought about like what is behind that. I don't know. I was just kind of like,
it was weird.
I mean, I also think I'm very casual about it. So I just put people's first names on it. I'm not like the so-and-so family or anything like that. But I do feel like at times when I would use it, I'd probably use it if there were like children in that family.
Right.
But truthfully, it's like a married couple is a family.
Yeah. But if it was a
yeah.
married couple that didn't have a kid, I would just put the Smiths.
Yeah.
And if it was a married couple that had children, I would put the Smith family, and they're not going to see the other cards that say family on there. So I don't think I'm offending anyone, but it just automatically, I didn't think about it. I just did it. But when you mentioned that conversation you had, I was like, oh, yeah, you know what? This is what happened when I was writing my holiday cards. It was kind of funny. We also want to talk about some new experiences or unexpected things that can come from starting a family. So for me, one of them is this whole conversation, and we've kind of talked about this before, but education for kids. I recently had to submit an application for a preschool for my child and then get approved to interview. And this interview process, the reason that this was unexpected or surprising to me is because where I'm from, number one, there's just not a whole lot of private schools. But additionally, I don't think you have to interview for private schools.
You mean
I don't know.
Right? Preschool.
We don't have a lot of private schools in general, but we also, preschools were all public. Like, it's like a business, you know?
I feel like I've heard that a lot of preschools are private because it's not required. That's just what I've heard. I mean, I'm not sending anyone to preschool, but...
Sorry. I meant like... So I'm not talking about private preschools in the sense that, it's a private business, which I know that's typically what private schools are. But I feel like the preschools from where I'm from, you could just... As long as they had an opening,
like apply, and
like the ratio wasn't too high for kids and teachers, that you could just sign your kid up and show up the next day. Whereas here, because there's such a need for, like, there's a lot of kids here and there's a lot of preschools. Some preschools feed into some of the private schools here, and those private schools typically won't necessarily allow...
There's a screening process
There's
involved.
a screening process, and part of that is if you go to a certain preschool, you have a much better chance, I guess is what I'm saying. And so this particular preschool, you applied to get interviewed, and the interview process was basically the whole family comes in. Me and my husband went with my son, and I went into like a chapel area where the director spoke to us about, how they see the whole preschool process, and it's a partnership with the parents and all that good stuff, and give us more insights than what would be given in the actual classroom. My husband, on the other hand, went into the classroom with my son, and I feel like, I don't know for sure, but I feel like they're not only evaluating my son in this interview, they're also evaluating my husband. And I talked to my husband ahead of time, and I was like, just make sure you're not hovering too much, because, and I had to tell myself that too, if I was going to be the one in there, because they're looking to see, like, do you allow your child to be?
Right.
Do you allow them to make mistakes?
Yeah.
Do you allow them to be a little bit adventurous, without putting them in danger, of course? And so he did, he kind of let him be. And they also strategically provided them with a questionnaire, the parents that were in the room.
The parents basically had a quiz.
It was a questionnaire as to how you handle discipline and that kind of thing. But the reason I say it was strategic is because it allowed the parents to focus on something other than the child.
To distract them so the kid could do something.
Exactly. So the kid could, be
play
their
on
true
their own,
selves
interact
without
with
being
other kids.
parented. Yeah, exactly. But some of the things that my husband told me after this ended was, they sat in a circle and the teacher would lead a song and say, touch your eyes and all that good stuff. And, the reason I'm telling you this is because I was just flabbergasted that a child had to go through an interview. And what does that even look like? Are you just sitting in a room with a teacher and they're going to interview you and see if you know the answers to all these questions? What is this like? And so I'm just giving you more details because I just found it fascinating. And then they would do a story time and see if the child could sit still and kind of like listen in. And then they did playtime, like free playtime. You can grab whatever you wanted. But then they said, okay, 1 minute and we're going to clean up. And sure enough, in 1 minute, she like rang a bell and said, okay, time to clean up. And I am like praying and thanking my lucky stars that my son cleaned up, because when I do that at home, he don't care. He's like, whatever, lady. And I even sing a cleanup song that I made up, and then my sister-in-law told me about a cleanup song. They didn't work, but he cleaned up for this teacher, so I was like super stoked. Well, at least he showed well in front of the teacher. Yep. And then one of them sat next to him, and he was playing with some strawberries in like some play tongs, and he was putting the strawberries in the basket with the tongs. So that shows motor skills. Like, that's why they want them to play with toys. And she said, oh, what are you playing with? And he goes, strawberries. I was like, oh my gosh, he said strawberries.
He picked the right fruit.
Excited. Yeah, exactly. And then she said, oh, what color are they? And he said, red. And I was just like, oh, good, he answered. So like, they're also obviously evaluating how involved the parents are with the child. Do they try to teach them things at home? They're not just relying on the preschool to
give them everything they need.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Understand self-control, self-awareness, and learn and teach at home.
Yeah. And so this is just my guess. I mean, obviously, I'm not a preschool teacher. I haven't gone through the preschool application process for any kids or anything like that. But I would imagine that this screening process probably does a couple of things for the school.
Absolutely.
One, I think you're mentioning to me before, as you're like looking at some different schools, that some of these schools have certain curriculum and that kind of stuff. So they want to make sure that the kid can maybe like handle that or keep up or whatnot. But I think another thing too that's kind of interesting, as I've been watching some shows on Netflix and whatnot, but I think that this is also an opportunity to identify if there might be any sort of like learning challenges that a kid might have, and how a school could either, they might have special programs that could help with that, or know of places to refer to or whatever. I mean,
Absolutely.
That's probably not news a parent wants to hear, truthfully. But
well, it could also be the flip side. Like if they're a little more advanced, maybe they should be in the the higher year class.
Right.
So
it could be a lot of different outcomes, but I would imagine that's probably part of what that whole process does too, or maybe indirectly. I don't know. But yeah.
But hey, good news. We just found out he got in.
Oh, yay.
So, yay. Very excited about that. And, it was a proud parent moment. I don't feel like I was vicariously living through my son. It's like his first accomplishment of
having to go through some other system that you didn't have control of the outcome necessarily.
Exactly. Yeah. So I felt like as parents, we are doing our jobs in terms of being involved in his life, conversing with him, teaching him things, because there's just so much in the world to teach. So you're talking, let's just say for one toy, right? You're talking about a truck. Oh, what color is the truck? Is this a big truck or a small truck? How do you teach all of those dynamics around this one truck? And maybe the truck has a name, like cars, every single car in the movie Cars has a name. How do you teach your kid this also has a name, but it also has parts? There's wheels.
Right, yeah.
There's a roof. There's a
window.
Hood, how do you, there's so much in this one little toy that your child has to learn, but you just have to kind of let it happen naturally, because as their mind starts to expand and their brain continues to grow, they'll get it. You don't have to force it. You just kind of, you have these emails that come to you that say what's going on with your toddler today, or your preschooler or whatever. And those things kind of help you put things into perspective and take steps at a time, rather than trying to kind of conquer the whole thing all at once, because it can get overwhelming. Yeah, so we've talked about a lot of things in this episode when it comes to starting or growing a family, and we'd love to hear your folks' perspective on anything that we talked about today. We don't have any specific questions for you, but your insights into any of the things that we discussed is always helpful. We really like to get all kinds of unique perspectives about these things. But thanks so much for listening to this episode of The Outright Effect. You can find us at theoutrighteffect.com, on social media at The Outright Effect on Instagram and Facebook, or email us at theoutrighteffect@gmail.com. See you guys next time.
Bye.